Welcome back to Lesson 4 of The Way of the Heart, the first of the Christ Mind trilogy of teachings, known as Way of Heart, Way of Transformation, and Way of Knowing. Essential core teachings of the Way of Mastery. Just want to bring your attention to a site called christmind.info if you haven't been there yet. It's a place where all of the teachings are available, all of the core texts, all 5 of them. And the 5 core texts are the Jeshua Letters, that recounts the Channel JM's first encounter with Jesus. The Way of the Servant, which is a very mystical book. It talks about enlightenment, the final stage of the path. And then the 3 trilogy books, The Way of the Heart, Way of Transformation, Way of Knowing. But beyond that, and this is what I'd like to draw your attention to, there's a whole series of sharings from Jeshua that were created in evening gatherings back in the 90s when this material was being channeled on individual subjects. And those are really great to spend time with. If you're spending 1 month per lesson, there's a lot of free time to do other things, right? And if you're interested in the Way of Mastery, really a great thing to do is find, 3 or 4 maybe extra, early years channelings a month and just listen to them and sit with them and be with them. The one I recommend is called Love Heals All Things, because that was the night that I first discovered these teachings. I've been a Course in Miracles student for many years. And then I studied for a while the teachings of the books by a guy named Brent Haskell. Brent had studied the Course for years and had done the workbook 3 years in a row, I think it was, which to me is just unbelievable. And then on January 1st of another year, he heard Jeshua's voice and asked him to start bringing something through. So he did, and it was, I think, designed as a corrective for the challenges a lot of students were having studying the Course. I had hit a dead end in my relationship with the Course and didn't really know what to do because I'd been reading and studying nothing but it for about 6 years. But this book, which is called The Other Voice by Brent Haskell, is one of the most beautiful channeled books I've ever heard. I used to say that if I only had one book to bring to the proverbial one book to an island, it might well be The Other Voice. He goes in and reteaches a lot of the Course lessons in ways and in language that was really helpful for me. So not many people have found this book, and I just really strongly recommend the Brent Haskell, The Other Voice, if you get a chance to look at that. And then, for me, in The Other Voice, the Haskell material, he talks about not as Jesus, like the name Jesus, like in the Course in Miracles, but the name Yeshua, Jeshua, also spelled Y-E-S-H-U-A sometimes, or Y''S-H-U-A, or whatever, all these different things, Yeshua, the way shower. So I got used to this idea of of hearing him as Jeshua in the Haskell material. And the Haskell material was as if God had looked down, or Jeshua had looked down, seen how I was struggling with the Course, and basically just had a checklist of all the ways that I needed to look at things differently. It was described differently. It was fantastically helpful. And I would have assumed that, maybe my journey is coming to a close with these materials. But I found myself continually going to the local bookstore in Arlington, Massachusetts in those days, called Unicorn Books. And one day I walked in and I was looking around at just 2-3 days a week. I'm just still going to the bookstore, even though I've been through all this time with these teachings. And I see off in the distance is like a little vertical line of light. Caught my attention from across the room. I thought, what's that? And I go over and it's called the Jeshua Letters. Now, I probably wouldn't have resonated with it at all if I hadn't just been reading the Haskell material in which the term Jeshua is used. So I thought, what's that about? So I opened this up, and there's this autobiographical story about this guy having an encounter with Jesus. And I'm kind of reading it, and I'm like, I don't know about this. This sounds a little, I don't know. Maybe this guy's just trying to make money off A Course in Miracles. But I also start reading the initial channelings that are happening in his relationship with Jesus here. And the material, though I'm trying to not feel this way, the material's really zinging me, like, whoa, the frequency of this material's really high. And I read a lot of these things. A lot. There are so many Jeshua channels out there now. I mean, a lot of them are, I'm sure, are very good. Another one I liked was Tom Carpenter. I know Judith Coates and Pamela Cribby, and there are lots of people out there now, right? Nothing against any of them. It's just, I think we resonate with some things more than others. But this stuff just hit me hard, and it felt personal too. There was something about the personal about it I couldn't describe. So there's a picture of the guy, John Mark Hammer, in the back. He now goes by JM, and he's a channel, and he says to me, I call him up because there's a number and it says private sessions available. I'm like, private sessions available? That's kind of a biggie. So I call him up, and he ends up saying, well, where are you? And I'm saying, well, I'm in Lexington, Mass. And some of you may have heard this story from others. I've shared it before. He said, where are you? He says, well, I'm in Santa Fe. He says, but I'm going to be just a few miles from Lexington, Mass in 2 weeks. Why don't you come see for yourself? So I did, and the evening gathering blew my mind. It was an hour and a half of Jeshua channeling, and then an hour or so of him taking questions and answers. But the beautiful thing is, the reason I'm going into this story again is that you can listen to this in the early years and lots of other things as well. These evening gatherings were recorded. That one was called Love Heals All Things, and if you go to the Q&A, my timid question there is the second question on the way. But the answer still blows me away to this day. The question I asked basically is, how if we can even ask a question about pain, how can there be an all-loving God? Big question. But the answer still, I don't know how many years ago, that was 1995, so a long time ago, 28 years ago, I guess, is still blowing me away, still trying to process that. So just invite you all to engage the early years while you're wishing that you could do the Way of the Heart more than once a month, maybe. So anyhow, that's just a suggestion. We're getting back to lesson 4. You see, I had to do this. I'm going to start at the beginning of the paragraph again because I talk so much. You see, I had to do the same, for I began to notice that there was a thread of desire in my heart to create some form of demonstration that would be so overwhelming that anyone who turned their attention to it could not help but be reminded that there was something far greater to life than living to survive or surviving to live. And even when I was young, I began to get glimpses. At first they were fleeting. Something was compelling me. But as I learned to trust desire, the pictures became clearer and clearer. I'm going to interrupt here. So a very important thing here, Jeshua was saying that he learned to trust desire, and that was an essential part of his journey. Back to the text. And I saw myself standing on hilltops surrounded by multitudes, and I marveled at the words that came through my mouth in these moments of revelation when I was still but a teenager. I saw glimpses and pictures of being loved by millions. I saw pictures and things I couldn't even comprehend because they were literally pictures of what I'm doing now. Interrupt again here. So that's pretty fascinating. He's talking about having visions when he was 12 in his physical incarnation, or so he says teenager. He was visions of when he was a teenager of the interactions with humanity that he's engaged in now. Continuing from the text, and how could a teenager living in Judea 2,000 years ago have any way of comprehending the use of the technologies of your modern world in which to communicate love? It made no sense to me, but still I decided to trust it. So, end of paragraph. So he's noticing a thread of desire arising in him, and he wants to create a demonstration to prove that there's something more to life than just surviving. Now, the demonstration, of course, is the entire passion of the crucifixion, resurrection, and so on. Back to the text. A part of that thread was the recognition that death is unreal. So, part of the crucifixion experience is proving that death is not real. Back to the text. And so, therefore, I ought to be able to create a demonstration that would prove it. Interrupting again, so this wonder question would arise in him, in his beingness. I wonder how I could do that. And this isn't really about the Father's will compelling him to something. This is about his soul and the Father's joining together in a desire, right? He's not separate from God. God is not separate from him. He's recognizing his union with God in the willingness to trust desire. Now, think about that for a moment. Back to the text. If that thought was born in you and you tried to share it with the world, wouldn't you be told you were crazy to dare to think such a thought so out of alignment with everything the world believes? But because I followed that thread of desire, I began to realize it kept speaking to me day after day and week after week. I wanted it to grow. I wanted it to be nurtured. So finally, I decided I am going to allow that thread to be nurtured. And I'm going to discover where it takes me and what it's all about. End of paragraph. So here he is making a decision, trusting desire. His Essene teachers, I think, and others would have taught him about this, about these energies, self-awareness of these energies arising, how to be in relationship with reality, how to be in relationship with desire, and to learn to trust it. And was his intention going to be to trust and deepen that connection, allowing it to be nurtured, or was he going to ignore it? His choice clearly was to allow it to be nurtured and discover where it took him and what it's all about. So we can see from his example, we have the same opportunity. If we do the exercises mentioned in Lesson 4, the question can become the same thing in our own mind. Well, are we going to trust desire and be curious, like, well, where is this going to take me? If this really is the connection with God, what might I discover in my relationship with God that is new and exciting and extraordinary, and where will that take me? In Jeshua's case, he shares, back to the text, and where it took me was into mastery of life and death, mastery of healing, mastery of consciousness. It took me into mastery of myself. It brought me home to my own Christed beingness. So that's where him following the thread of desire and allowing it to be nurtured led him. We might well ask, once I discover this thread of desire, well, what would allow it to be nurtured? Might I be willing to make a commitment in my prayers and intentions to allow the thread of desire that I'm beginning to feel in these exercises after doing them for the week? Let's do the exercises first before we talk about these things much further. But where might they lead and how might they be nurtured? The first step in nurturing them are the exercises given here in this Lesson 4. Back to the text. Because I followed that thread, I can talk with you today. There are many of you that appreciate what I have done because you see me as a spokesman for the truth. Is it not time that you followed your own thread and became likewise a spokesperson for reality? For just as you have been sent to me, there will be many sent to you as you step from being a seeker to a finder. For as you take up your right place, you become a vehicle through which the voice of God will creatively touch the lives of countless persons that you may never meet physically. End of paragraph. Somewhere later in Way of Mastery, and apologies, there's so many teachings and so many things that I don't always remember exactly where it was. I've also been on about 18 trips and pilgrimages, and some of which he's channeled within. So I don't remember exactly where it is all the time. But he says that, one thing that you might not realize is that we, and he's talking about himself and the Ascended Masters, they refer to it as the Christ Council, we're not on the planet. We're not incarnated. These are beings that aren't incarnated. Says, so really, the main game here is you guys and what you're doing, because you're on the planet. And a lot of people won't listen or can't hear or won't trust the idea of listening to, spiritual beings, non-physical beings. They'll only trust something that's coming out of a physical mouth. That's the minimum requirement. They may not trust that either, but you understand what I'm saying, that they'll only listen to what people are saying in the world. So really, it's up to you guys. We're trying to support you. And so being a spokesman for truth. Joshua is being a certain type of spokesman of truth, and we believe these are coming through these channeled materials, but a lot of people won't believe them for one reason or another. So can we find ways of expressing the truth that isn't necessarily cloaked in spirituality or cloaked in religion, but just expressing love, being respectful, loving our enemies, not judging, and teaching through being? What are we teaching in the world? It's not just a question of words, but it's a question of how are we treating each other. Most important of all, the most important directive, the most important commandment is love one another. So, for as you take up your right place, you become a vehicle through which the voice of God will creatively touch the lives of countless persons you may never even ever meet physically. You were birthed to be grand. You were birthed for greatness. You were birthed to shine forth such light into this world that the world remembers that light is true and darkness an illusion. Be you therefore that which you are, and you are the light of the world. And I will delight in journeying with you. For if I can join with this, my beloved brother, to create communication, so too can I join with anyone who chooses to step in their own Christedness. And the thread is the thread of desire. It reminds me of when I started doing my own channeling. I was very skeptical of it, and over about 10 years, there were fulfilled prophecies, a very specific fulfilled prophecy that came through. I asked for proof and got this fulfilled prophecy. And then a whole bunch of other things happened that really made me believe that it wasn't just me talking. And it certainly didn't feel like I was. But you can imagine if you're thinking about entering into the realm of channeling, that's quite a step. And you want to make sure that it's legitimate and helpful and real. And so gradually over time, but I expressed my doubts to him at one point, and he said, well, let the fact that I'm speaking through you be proof. And he's sort of saying that in this paragraph too. I'm not sure that's exactly what he's saying here, but he definitely said that clearly to me. He says, let it be proof that if I can do it with you and you can do it, that anyone can do it. I thought, he just zinged me, and I'm thanking him for it. It's like, what's that all about? So, back to the text. Therefore, begin to turn towards the energy of desire within yourself, to separate the wheat from the chaff, by first learning to feel it for just a minute without judging it, and then to deepen that process. And I tell you, you will reach the point where with every breath you breathe, you're in touch with the energy of desire, and that is the only voice that you will give authority to. End of paragraph. You may recall just a little while ago, he said the only authority that's valid in your world is the voice of God in your own mind and in your own heart. So this is the how to be in relationship with that voice. Very clearly, turn towards the energy of desire. This is how to be in relationship with the one voice of true authority in your life. Turn towards the energy of desire within yourself, within your heart, by first learning to feel it for just a minute without judging it, and then to deepen that process. I'm going to say that again because it's such an important thing. How do we come into right relationship with the one true authority in our lives? We turn towards the energy of desire within our hearts. We feel it, we learn to feel it, just for a minute, without judging it, and then deepen that process. And from the text, Joshua shares, and I tell you, you will reach that point where, with every breath you breathe, you are in touch with the energy of desire. And that is the only voice that you will give authority to. We'll stop there for now. The next one will be the fight. It may be a short one. There's not a lot left, but there'll be one more video on Lesson 4 of The Way of the Heart. Thanks for listening. This is Dave Schock.